भूर्भुवस्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो न प्रचोदयात्. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us meditate on the glorious effulgence of that Supreme Being who created the universe. May she enlighten our hearts and direct our understanding. Please be seated. Thank you. Okay. Hi everyone. So just to sort of let the Buddhist class know a little bit of context, over the last few weeks, we've been talking about the idea of yoga and how deep the idea is, because yoga tends to be something that people think is all about physical exercises, but there is a whole other dimension to yoga, which is a much more spiritual pursuit, a much more spiritual path. And we've been talking about that over the last few weeks. And just to recap, we say that yes, physical exercises are important because our body is the best tool, the best instrument we have for making spiritual progress. But then we have to go beyond that and also try and look at ways that we can control our mind as well as our body. And we are looking at some of the disciplines which are involved, which include, for example, being truthful to the core. What you think, what you say, what you do must all match up. You must be celibate to the core if you want to follow the path of Raj Yoga. You must have cleanliness in thought, word and deed. So there are so many disciplines that are involved before you even sit down to meditate. And sometimes it can take months and years to master some of these disciplines, these mental disciplines, which are necessary for you to even stand a chance of success in yoga. And we looked last week at the idea of, for example, the Kundalini, which is a sort of an energy which is lying at the base of the spine. And through various exercises of mental and physical disciplines, including various breathing exercises we were looking at last week, we are able to sort of tap into the energy which is at the Kundalini and hope that it eventually starts rising further and further up the spine until we start to develop more sort of spiritual awareness. And that is the aim of this process of yoga, is for that energy to eventually reach the brain. And that's where you get the full blaze of enlightenment. So just to sort of carry on from there, what we were saying is that individuals who have sort of tapped into this energy, they sort of have an incredible power, an incredible aura to them, to the point where, somebody who, doesn't have that energy sort of tapped into, they can say the most eloquent things, they can say the most beautiful things, but it somehow falls flat. It doesn't really seem to have an impact with the people who are listening. But for somebody who has the Kundalini awakened, that energy, that spiritual energy, that really carries such tremendous weight. So even the simplest things that they say, the simplest things that they do, carry a significant amount of importance, to the point where their words carry beyond centuries, they carry beyond millennia, and they continue to impact humanity for a long period of time, because there is a tremendous spiritual depth behind what they are saying, even behind the guise of very simple words and simple language. So last week we looked at various breathing exercises, and we said that the point of these breathing exercises is to develop some kind of control over the life force which is driving our lungs, which is driving our body. And it's the same life force which is in me and you, which is the life force which has breathed energy into the entire universe. All the sort of forces that we see in the universe, gravity and motion, all of that is the same energy. And it really sort of ties in with a lot of what sort of modern science talks about, is that you can't create or destroy energy. It only transfers from one kind of energy to another. So that's what we were looking at last time. So let's move on now. So we were looking at pranayama last week. You might think that's the end of yoga, but actually there's quite a lot more still to go. So the next step of Raj Yoga is something called pratyahara. And pratyahara means gaining control over our mind, so making sure that it doesn't keep attaching to things of the sensory world. Because say, for example, you see a very bright, colourful picture, your eyes naturally stick to it without you even saying, I want to look at this picture. Your eyes naturally stick to it. If you smell a delicious smell, you're like, I really want to eat that food. So in a way, our mind is a slave to our senses, all the sort of sensory sort of attachments which are there in the world. Our mind just sort of sticks to it, and the mind is a slave. But what this particular step of Raj Yoga is telling us is, let us regain some control over our mind so that we are no longer a slave to all the things of the world around us. And the thing is, what a lot of faith healers tend to do is, say, for example, you've got a pain in a certain part of your body. What a faith healer may say to you is, try and get a harness over your mind so that you're able to somehow block out that sensation of pain from this particular part of the body and focus on another part of the body which isn't in pain. It's a kind of pain relief that they try and encourage us to do. But there comes with this kind of technique a tremendous sort of health warning, because sometimes what these spiritual healers try to do is they try to use some kind of a hypnosis to try and get us to sort of focus away from the pain and focus on wellness. But the problem with hypnosis is that actually what you're doing is you're handing the control of your mind over to somebody else. And this is something very dangerous, because the whole point of spirituality is to try and seek mastery, try and seek freedom over yourself. So how is getting freedom, how are you going to achieve that freedom if you hand over the reins of your mind and your will to somebody else? You are in a way making yourself dependent on that sort of spiritual healer. So you have to be very careful. Any spiritual master or healer or guru that you go to, if they try and sort of take away power from you, this should be a red flag straight away, because a true, genuine spiritual master will want you to experience that freedom for yourself. They will want to do everything in their power to empower you to walk the path. So a genuine spiritual master will not sort of just prepare the path for you and make things easier for you. They will in fact prepare you for the path, make you feel empowered and confident that you are able to overcome adversities despite, all the sort of pain and difficulties that you yourself are going through. So yeah, please be careful. And there are a lot of people, a lot of movements out there with very sort of colourful music and graphics. And just be very careful, be very cautious, because there are loads of them out there. Look very carefully at what they are trying to promote, the teachings that they have in their sort of system. And if it makes sense to you, only then go ahead with it. But if there is any part of it which tells you just believe in this blindly without thinking about it, that should immediately be a red flag, and you should probably stay away from a path like that. So any spiritual master who really wants has your benefit at heart will want to keep all the power within you and not give it to somebody else. You shouldn't have this dependency on others. You should be able to make your own path. And when you are able to, it generates tremendous strength and tremendous confidence within you, because essentially you are the master and you are not dependent on anyone or anything around you. And that is essentially what spirituality is all about, is gaining that mastery over ourselves. So we move on. What we think about is, okay, we want to control our minds, but our minds are very, very difficult to control. And that's something that we find, for example, when you just sit down and close our eyes to meditate just for a period of 5 minutes, our mind will sort of start rummaging around and doing all sorts of things which will distract us from our endeavor of meditation. And according to Hindu philosophy, there is an analogy given of our mind. Our mind is in a way like a very active monkey. Monkeys are very sort of active by nature. But not only that, a monkey which has been given wine to drink freely from. So now you've got a drunk monkey, and you think that's the state of our mind. But actually, no, it gets worse than that. Not just a drunk monkey who has been stung by a scorpion. So you can imagine this poor drunk monkey is howling around, jumping around in pain. And that is the state of our mind. But actually it goes even worse than that, because it's a drunk monkey that has been stung by a scorpion, but is then also possessed by a demon. You can imagine how crazy this monkey would be. It's just an analogy of our mind, that it can be so incredibly active, so incredibly out of control. And what this analogy is showing is, yes, our mind, which is already very active by nature, is then gets drunk with the desires for this world. And then it gets stung by jealousy at the success of others. And then it sort of gets possessed with a sense of pride and self-importance. And that is the mind that all of us have to do battle with. So how do we even begin? How do we begin this process of controlling our minds? So when we sit down to meditate, what's recommended in this path of yoga is just watch your mind, give your mind the power to start with. Just sit down and close your eyes and see what havoc your mind will start to cause when you sit down to meditate. It will cause all sorts of havoc. In a way, it will be like a child throwing the biggest tantrum ever, throwing all the toys out the pram. It will cause absolute havoc in your mind. It will do anything and everything to distract you from meditation. All the itches known to humanity will come on you. You'll say, oh, I'm so itchy, I'm so itchy. You won't be able to sit still. Your mind will do everything it can to throw you off. But the key to success in this particular way is by saying, let me distance myself from my thoughts. Let me pretend like I'm watching a film on the TV. I am distant to it. I'm separate from it. Just keep that distance from all of this craziness that is going on in your thought patterns. Just watch it and observe it. And in a way, you're acting a bit like a parent trying to control a tantruming child at this particular point. Your child will do all sorts of things. The kind of thoughts that will come into your head will probably shock you and surprise you. But in a way, knowledge is power. We need to know what our mind is capable of before we stand a chance of being able to control it. So just keep a distance, watch the crazy stuff that your mind does, the crazy thoughts that will pop up. And in a way, just try not to react, try not to get caught up emotionally with what your mind is throwing at you. And in a way, you're like a parent who is watching a child and just not reacting to the tantrums of the child. You're kind of like expressionless, you're just watching it. And you know, the child will sort of start seeing that the parent is sort of not reacting, not actually giving anything to feed back off. And then the child will start to become more and more uncomfortable because why is my parent just staring at me like this, expressionless? I'm being so naughty here. Why is my parent behaving like this? And the child will eventually start to calm down. It will start to sort of feel very uncomfortable at what it's doing. And that's essentially what we are trying to do to our mind, which is like a tantruming child. Because when we kind of keep a distance from it and we watch what it's doing, expressionless, just keep a distance. Don't get emotionally caught up in what your mind is doing. That is when you start eventually slowing your mind down. And the key to this is regularity. And you have to do this on a regular basis. Make it part of your daily routine. Say that every morning and every evening, I'm going to spend just 5 minutes just sitting down, trying to control my mind, see what happens to it. And through this regularity, you eventually find that more and more, there'll be less and less distractions going on in your mind. You'll be able to think eventually a day will come where you're like, oh, you know what? I've just spent 5 minutes without having any other distractions around. I've just been able to focus purely on my meditation and not have all of these other thoughts blocking up my mind. So that's eventually the point that we are trying to achieve, is that we are for the first time, hopefully, in control of our mind. Our mind is under our power, and we are not the slave to our mind anymore. And that is essentially what the path of Pratyahara is all about. And then eventually, this process could take months, it could take years, but there's no sort of, deadlines or anything to follow. Do this at your pace, whenever you feel comfortable, and try and incorporate it into your daily routine. So the next step beyond this is something called Dharan. And what happens with Dharan is, okay, yes, we have channeled our mind. Our mind isn't just sticking to anything and everything it sees and experiences. What we do now is say, there's you're sitting down to meditate. See if you can tell your mind, let me just focus all of my attention on my hand, for example. Let me just focus on the air which is moving around on top of my hand, to the exclusion of every other part of your body, sort of any rumblings in your tummy or coughs or wheezes or sneezes. Try not to focus on that. Try and get your mind to focus just on one particular part of your body, like your hand, while you sit down to meditate. And this is the next step, is being able to say to your mind, go here, and your mind will go there, rather than your mind telling you where to go everywhere. So that's the next step. So rather than focusing on our hand, that's just the testing ground. See if your mind does what you tell it to do for a change. Then eventually the next step is then saying, let me then focus on my heart. Now that my mind is doing what I tell it to do, I want my mind to focus on my heart. And because your heart is, it's something very difficult to abstractly think about, what we say is, imagine that there is a beautiful effulgent lotus in your heart, made of light. Try and focus your mind on that beautiful lotus in your heart. And that is how you can start to gain control and mastery over your mind, focusing on that one point. Because for the first time, you are no longer under the control of your mind, just sort of causing havoc. So that's the next step. And eventually what you do is, when you are serious about spiritual progress, what you will find is that, in fact, when you sort of get interactions with the outside world, you kind of interact with worldly things and worldly affairs, you'll find it starts to become a bit of a distraction. So when you are on this particular path, it may actually be very helpful to you to try and block out anything which is sort of worldly. Try and focus all of your energies on things which are spiritual. Try and read only spiritual things. Read from spiritual masters. Try and sort of block out all of this sort of worldly chatter. Try and also interact with individuals who also have a very sort of spiritual bent to their will. They want to be spiritual. Try and focus your attention on being with those kinds of individuals. Because as you sort of progress on this journey of yoga, you start to develop a tremendous sensitivity, a tremendous alertness, because you are finally able to get a more subtle understanding of the universe. Because right now we've got a very sort of crass understanding of the universe. We just sort of see it as a purely physical thing, this world and this universe. But when you progress on this journey, you get a more subtle awareness of everything around you, to the point where even the drop of a pin will sound like a thunderbolt. This level of alertness and awareness is incredible, and you start to experience the universe and the world in ways that you could never have imagined before. And as we were saying, you start to develop certain mental abilities, like developing tremendous level of concentration, being able to sort of hear conversations that are going on far away, being able to perhaps read other people's minds. These are the things that we've talked about. But they're all things that become possible when you put in this tremendous discipline, physical and mental disciplines. In a way, there's actually a lovely Indian parable which says that when there is a particular star which is visible in the sky, and the rain falls when that star is visible in the sky, if an oyster comes to the surface of the ocean and catches that particular raindrop, what it does is it's a very precious thing for that oyster, and it dives deep down into the depths of the ocean. And there is just a parable, by the way. From that raindrop comes a beautiful pearl. So in a way, we have to be a bit like that oyster. When we are spiritually ready, we open ourselves to getting that special raindrop. When we have received that special raindrop, that special spiritual message from that spiritual master, we kind of close up and we kind of go down to the depths of the ocean and focus all of our attention, all of our energy on developing this pearl within us. So that's just the sort of message of this particular approach. And it's an approach which is not necessarily suited for everybody. For you, spirituality, for some people, spirituality may be all about sort of interacting with greater humanity. But this is a very different approach to say, let's focus inwards, let's develop myself spiritually and mentally, and I want to eventually become enlightened. So that's the process that we all have to go through. And there's actually a beautiful analogy which helps us understand the importance of association, the things that we tend to associate ourselves with, the media that we watch, the things that we see, the things we do, the kind of people that we interact with. And that is, for example, if you look at rainwater, all the raindrops, they come from the same place. They come from the same clouds, and they start off with equal value. When that one raindrop falls in your hand, it's good enough to drink. But when a raindrop falls in a gutter, its value diminishes immediately. When that raindrop falls on a very hot surface, it evaporates. When a raindrop falls on a lotus leaf, it shines like a pearl. And when it eventually falls into an actual oyster, it can turn itself into a pearl. And that's, in a way, an analogy for explaining how things are in this world. How we interact, what kind of things we associate with, can have a tremendous impact on our sort of spiritual journey and our spiritual growth. So that's a very important thing to remember about that. Another sort of thing which is incredibly sensitive at this point is when you have chosen your spiritual master, when you have chosen your spiritual teaching, make sure you follow it through to its conclusion. And that is the only way to success. And actually, if you think about it, it's true even in our sort of day-to-day lives. You choose a goal, make sure that you follow it to its conclusion, because if you sort of nibble a bit here, nibble a bit there, then you're never really going to accomplish anything. So the real way of getting this sort of tremendous spiritual yearning is by saying, let me focus tremendously on this particular idea and make that idea my own. I want to think that idea, breathe that idea, live that idea. All my whole mind, my whole energy is focused on this idea. And that is the only way that we will sort of reach success. One day, a student went to his teacher, and the student said to him, I really want to sort of become enlightened. What is the best way? How can I become enlightened? And his teacher took the student to a river, and he told the student, come into the river with me. So the teacher and student went into the river, and the teacher, shockingly, got the student's head and pushed it down into the water. And the student was shocked. He said, what's going on here? What's going on here? I must breathe. I can't breathe. Eventually, the teacher lifted him out of the water. And the teacher said, how did that make you feel? And the student said, I was desperate. I was so desperate for air. I was so desperate for freedom. I couldn't bear it. I had to come out. And that is essentially the analogy that we have for how tremendous our spiritual yearning should be for us to even stand a chance of success. We are living in this sort of material world around us. But if we have such tremendous spiritual yearning to the point where we feel suffocated, we can't breathe, that is when you know that you are on the right tack. You will have the tremendous discipline, the tremendous yearning within you to focus on your spiritual journey and actually eventually reach the conclusion and become enlightened for yourself. So this you have to follow everything to its conclusion to stand any chance of success. What I'll do is I will end with a little story again. Once upon a time, there was a man and he wanted to dig a well. So he found a spot and he started digging. He dug about 5 feet into the ground. And a passerby came by and he said, oh, why are you digging a hole over here? I know a much better spot where you can get some water much more quickly. So stop digging here. I will show you a better spot. So the man came out of his hole and he said, okay, I'll follow you. And the passerby showed him another spot. And the man started digging. He said, okay, great. I'm going to start digging here and I'll get water so quickly. But then he dug another 5 feet and there was still no sign of water. And he was sweating and exhausted. And he said, what a waste of time. And then another passerby came by and he says, why are you digging it here? This is the worst place that you should be digging your well. Come over here, I will show you the best spot. So the poor man came out of his second well and went to the new spot and again started digging and digging and digging. And there was no sign of water anywhere. And he was so fed up and, sweating and tired from this whole process. He had not made any progress whatsoever. And then his friend came by and his friend said, what are you doing? Why are you so exhausted? What are you trying to achieve here? And the poor man says, I've been trying to dig a well. I've dug so much. I've dug about 5 feet here, 5 feet here, 5 feet here, because people keep telling me different places to go to keep digging. And his friend said, well, that's so silly. If you had just stuck to the same spot, you would have dug 20 feet into the ground and you would have definitely hit water. So that's in a way the moral of the story. Don't keep nibbling things here and there and everywhere. In spirituality, there are so many different gurus. There are so many different pathways out there. But what we have to learn is don't nibble a bit here, nibble a bit there. choose one which feels right for you and follow it to its conclusion. Because if you nibble a bit here, nibble a bit there, you'll have spent all this effort and achieved nothing. So focus on one and lead it to its conclusion, and hopefully one day we can all become enlightened. That's it, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Because obviously I say this with every class, you don't have to believe in anything that I've said, just think about it for yourself. Any doubts, anything that you're like, hang on, that doesn't make any sense, anything like that? Yes?
So the idea of sticking to one path and not like nibbling,
yes.
Could that not also be like a sign of stubbornness, of like having the wrong path but then like choosing to keep going along it instead of like realizing that you need to try a different approach?
That's a very good point for sure. So the thing is, what you have to do is when you are on that sort of journey of choosing the right path, make sure you follow your intuition and you look out for the red flags. The red flags are things where people are trying to take control away from you. They're asking you to believe things blindly. They are the things to look out for. And you may, we are all human. We all make mistakes. So it's very possible that you come to a path and you think this is right for me, but then you start following it and something somehow doesn't feel right. So for you, then maybe you should try and explore other opportunities, but to the best of our ability, try and focus on the one which is right for you. Try and really think very, very carefully before which path you choose, because if we don't have some kind of element of stubbornness and some element of determination, how, in a way, are we going to achieve anything in this world? So even, in terms of material endeavors, if you want to really, really get the top grades, you have to have that determination and that grit. So we shouldn't see that as a negative thing. We should see it as a positive thing in this particular approach. Just be extremely cautious and careful when you're thinking about which approach is right for you. And have that grit within you to say, you know what, I'm going to be so strong within myself, I'll be able to move mountains, I'll be able to move the stars, because it's only with that determination and grit that we can achieve anything in this world. That's a great question, thank you. Any other questions? Anything else? Okay. All right, so if everyone's happy, please do think about what we've discussed and hopefully see you next time. Thank you.
Free e-learning course in Hinduism. To register, please visit www.hindu-academy.com.
Talks on Hinduism. Sponsored by People Care. Encouraging caring for the elderly in their own homes. For more information, please visit peoplecare.com.